Welcome to our workshop series on cybersecurity today, how to stay safe in your digital world. My name is Jeremy Hopwood. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer here at Pinnacle Financial Partners, and we're happy to put this together and hope that by the time we get through this presentation, you've been able to pick up some tools that will help you and some knowledge that will help you to stay safe in your personal and professional world. So this first slide shows cybersecurity breaches are very, very common in today's environment. We had several in the last couple of years that are prevalent. It seems that every time you turn on the news channel, you've got another large name having a breach or an incident. Some of the ones here that you're familiar with this year, the DNC, the VA, Department of Personnel Management, lots of records have been leaked. Sony having its breach and being attacked. Some of the bigger retail names that you see here, it's very, very prevalent. So the intent of this training is not to cause any fear or concern. What we're trying to do is help equip you to understand that it's becoming more prevalent, it's becoming more common, and we want to make sure that we have at least an awareness out there. Today's goal is to help you become what we call a hard target. Easy targets are easy to hit. We want to help you get all the data that you can acquire from this presentation today to make yourself a hard target so that you can avoid exposure, avoid loss, and ID theft. A couple of the things we're going to talk about here today, we're going to talk about keyloggers and malware, how to watch out for those and beware, how to identify when you see a hyperlink that someone might send you either in an email or a text, how to manage and mitigate the risks that come along with the social media world and the profiles and the tools that we have, software and applications on our phones and on our browsers. We're going to talk about how to manage and build safe passwords, and we're going to talk about how to be as safe as you can with Wi-Fi, making sure that you've got computer backup, and finally, what to do and what tips you can take and where to go if you think you might have been hacked or compromised in some way. First thing that we like to do is help people understand the different types of threats and the sources that are out there. You might hear people or the news media refer to these as threat vectors or attack vectors. All that really means is these are the different ways and paths or routes that people might try to attack you, whether it be in your personal life or at your corporate office. Some examples of the various ways or types of threat vectors that are out there. Email is still the number one and most common way that attacks come in and threats happen, and that's through people sending, again, hyperlinks inside of an email or attachments. Network perimeter, meaning firewall. A lot of folks still don't have firewalls or something that's protecting their computer from a wireless or an attachment coming across a USB stick or something of that nature. Something that's also becoming very, very prevalent these days is social engineering. This is an attack on a user through either a social engineering site or through other mechanisms where they might try to get data or useful information out of a user. There's websites, and there are various ways that once you're visiting a website that maybe your browser gets hijacked, or they call that a session hijacking, or that you've gone to a website that is not legitimate. Remote access, this is wireless or hotspots. We're going to talk about ways that attackers try to breach you there, and or your mobile phone or your tablet, your personal devices. We're going to identify the risks that are out there. These are some examples of the risks that are out there. Of course, malware distribution, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what malware is, but it comes in phishing through email or malicious ads on a website or scripts that are built in to a website page. Identity theft is very common. Privacy concerns, things that a lot of people don't really consider, and we're going to go through this again and just show you some examples of being more cautious with what you're posting and what you're presenting online and the data that you're sharing freely, and how people can use that to to cause harm. First thing, let's get started, is we're talking about malware. It seems to be, years ago, you heard more of the term and usage called virus. Now you hear more people talking about malware. At the end of the day, malware and viruses are used interchangeably in the media. Even in passing, people will be referring to something as a piece of malware, and typically what it really means is it's a piece of software that was designed with malicious intent, and it has a malicious payload, something that is trying to harm you or trying to gather or steal data or information, things like your username or credit card number, passwords, things of that nature. You might have also heard someone mention the use of a keylogger in passing. Keylogging is software or another version of a malware that would compromise your computer and start to collect data such as your keystrokes, meaning the different keys that you type on your computer. It would actually capture it at that level and provide it back to its source. We're going to talk today about malware and keyloggers. One of the things that this is a couple examples of how these things typically work. The first example that we talk about here is you might get an email and it has an attachment or it has a link. Many times if it's a link, it'll just say, hey, this is, an example might be in your message says, hey, check this out, or take a look at this cool video I saw on the internet, something of that nature, and then there's just a link. And many times the link looks benign, looks like something you might trust, but when you actually click on it, it takes you somewhere that you had no intention of going. Same with browsing a website. Many times it starts off very, very simple. You've gone to a known good site such as an ESPN, and perhaps you're a UK Wildcats fan like I am, and you decide to click on the link there that talks about the status of the Wildcats, and the next thing you know, you've been forwarded to another site or off into another destination that you had no intention of going. And those microsites, or those areas that I would call a smaller hosted sites, they're more susceptible to being compromised. And so when you arrive at that website, again, taking a pause here, it used to be that you had to download something in order to be infected, and you had to, when you got to a website, you actually had to do something in order for you to be infected. Now today, in the environment that we're in today, it's as simple as just visiting the website. You can visit the website and not necessarily click on anything else on that website and still have a compromise. Again, the intent is not to scare someone and say, well, I'm just never going to browse the internet. That's not realistic either. What we want to do is help you to understand and identify when something is happening or how to prevent it. So one of the things that, again, you're being cautious and being having knowledge and understanding what's happening on your computer is the desire of this workshop series, and to help you avoid, as it shows here at the bottom, once one of the bad actors gets control of your machine, they can monitor software, they can steal your data, and we certainly want to prevent that. So we're going to talk about some different types of the threats and what we can do, the different precautions based on the different areas. So as a user, for example, understanding how to customize your social media settings to maximize your privacy. Every piece of software or every website that you are a subscriber to has the responsibility to offer you an opt-out or offer you settings in order for you to allow or disallow how much information is shared. That these types of sites that I'm speaking of that are common would be sites such as LinkedIn or Facebook. Those are areas that you can simply download the app, and or you can simply go to the website and start using it right away. But unless you dig into the settings or check preferences, you might not know that just by signing up that you're using what's called the default standards, for example. And if you want to tighten what is shared out there, you need to go and find those security preferences. And that can be done as easily as a simple browser search, Googling, how do I set up better privacy on Facebook, or how do I better set up privacy on LinkedIn? Those options are out there. We need to also identify that as a user, being careful with things as simple as phone calls. And I'll give you an example. Is I often have a phone call where I'll pick up the phone and they'll say, "Hi, Mr. Hopwood, this is so-and-so, and I'd like to verify your identity before we go any further." And as I tell every one of those people that called me, if you called me, I'm not verifying anything. If you need this level of verification, I will call you back. And I don't just simply hang up and call the number that called me. I go and look online, and one example is a healthcare provider here in town, Vanderbilt, has called me before as a callback from my doctor. And they call back and they say, before we can go further, I need to validate your identity. And I always say, I'll call you back. Because you never know when someone's trying to be an imposter and say, this is Vanderbilt, when it's really not, and they get you to give you a social, or they ask you a date of birth, or anything that they want to offer with the intention of trying to offer real services. Another scam that's out there, Microsoft, people will call and say, hey, this is Microsoft, we've identified that your computer's been compromised, and we need you to verify some of your data here, and in many cases even take remote control of your computer. So you have to be very, very careful what types of calls you get. What I often say is, the rule of thumb is, if you take an unsolicited call or an unexpected call, you should always be cautious, especially if the caller asks you to provide information that you believe they should have. Now let's talk about another common area where we see types of threats and some precautions. This is, again, I mentioned this earlier, the number one threat on the planet today is email. It's the number one approach that's used for compromise. A common practice that you will see is an email that will contain a hyperlink, and it will say something like, hey, check out this video, or hey, have you seen this yet? And it will have a hyperlink. And some of the risks that we now have is there's technology that's been developed in the last year or so that now shortens URLs. So it used to be something simple such as http www.google.com. Now we're seeing things that are obscured, if you will. So it would be some examples, and we'll show them to you later in this series. But for example, bit.ly is a common one that you're seeing, and it's just a way to try to help us, but it obscures the actual target, and it's very, very risky not knowing where you're going. Also, we want to help you understand the risk of opening attachments, and we're going to provide you something with what we call a Super 6 approach. There's 6 key things you can look at every email and give yourself pause and some tools to help figure out and determine, should I click or open these things. Finally, the requirements and precautions that you should think about from a network perspective. It's amazing to me in conversations with friends and family how many people still don't have a firewall in their home or at their place of business. Many people, small businesses and homes, have broadband connections, such as, for example, in the Nashville market, Comcast is a large player, and Comcast will come in and install a router for you, and technically you can plug your computer into that router and start to work. If you don't go out and intentionally purchase a firewall or put a router or device in between your computers and your home network and that connection that the provider gives you, you have unnecessary risk. And it's very, very simple. A lot of these devices can be purchased for $50 nowadays, and also provide out-of-the-box configuration, so you don't have to be very technical. There's lots of documents, and one of the things I tell you here is you can also there's plenty of people out there that have knowledge in this area that would be able to help you install something like that. Second, you want to make sure that you have advanced endpoint protection. Most people think of antivirus, and that was kind of, again, another term that we used to call it, antivirus protection. The new terminology is called advanced endpoint protection. You want to make sure that you're not just putting a check mark and getting a free antivirus client or something of that nature without making sure that it has capabilities to check things such as the URLs that you're browsing to. It checks if something's plugged into one of your USB ports. It also watches for that type of traffic. So that's what it means when we say advanced endpoint protection. It's not just antivirus anymore. It's looking at multiple things that are happening on the PC. And then finally, public Wi-Fi. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the series, but you have to be very, very careful. One of my common themes that I give in training classes is the old adage that my grandfather taught me, and that is, nothing is free. And just because it says free Wi-Fi, I would caution you that a lot of the attacks that we've seen over the last few years have come through free Wi-Fi. So you have to be careful. Just because you see something that says, hey, join our free Wi-Fi, and you might think, well, I'm going to save some of my data plan. You need to really ask yourself if it's worth the risk of a potential compromise. And is it a trusted vendor, right? Is this a larger national chain, or is this a mom and pop type shop that's offering you free Wi-Fi? And do you believe that they've put appropriate protection in place? Some other precautions, such as website and internet usage, remote access, and mobile device usage. When it comes to website and internet usage, we want to make sure that you are using security apps to guard your credentials. As I mentioned in the previous slide, you want to make sure that you're running an advanced endpoint protection software that also watches over and tells you in your browser. It would be an add-in to your browser that says, yes, this is a known safe site, or be careful, some visual that says this is not a trusted site. You want to make sure that you create and use strong passwords and that you're not reusing them. Again, we're going to talk more about this in the slides to come. Making sure that you secure your passwords with an encrypted software program such as a Vault program. When it comes to remote access, making sure that your wireless is set up securely. Again, I mentioned making sure you do that with a router that you can purchase, and consider even asking for assistance or hiring that to be done. Again, it's very affordable to make sure that you set up your wireless properly, and it's a good investment to make sure that your network is safe. Many folks don't realize that with today's technology, their wireless is so strong that their neighbors 2 and 3 houses down pick up their wireless signal, and it's a dangerous opportunity that's just sitting there waiting for someone to have access to try to compromise your network. Mobile devices obviously are one of our largest attack vectors, with folks having more and more mobiles and mobile access and applications. There's something called geolocation services, and again, we'll talk about this in slides to come about even the photos that you take sometimes have the geolocation turned on, and that can give away dates and times of where you're at. Can do things like let people know you're not at home right now, that you're traveling, and you don't want your mobile phone or mobile app to be giving out that data that you don't want public knowledge. And again, careful with games and apps that want access to your contacts and privacy. This is a very, very common thing when I'm installing a game or an application on my phone. You most of the time get a pop-up that says this application wants to have access to your photos, or this application wants to have access to your contacts, or this application wants to have access to your files. You want to be very, very careful and very, very selective on saying yes or no to these things, because they could in turn share that data. So finally, we're going to talk about and make sure you help understand what to do if you feel like you've been the victim of a hack or an identity issue, if you believe your identity might have been stolen. Who and when to call, when you call law enforcement versus an IT partner versus identity protection services. So we'll discuss that further as well. So how do you combat the risks? What are things that you can do? These are the topics that we're going to go through. We want to help you understand the anatomy of a hyperlink. Hyperlinks, again, are those things that start with HTTP : and they have an internet address. We want you to understand the additional risks of the shortened URLs, what tools you can use to understand where the target really is pointed. We're going to help you to understand how to customize your social media settings and maximize your privacy, using and creating strong passwords. Again, management of those passwords, making sure that you're not using, for example, the same password that you're using on your banking application that you're using on your Facebook login, as an example. We're going to help you make sure that you understand what geolocation services are and make sure that you're not unintentionally turning them on, and using security apps to safeguard your credentials. So we're going to go into a section on understanding hyperlinks. We're going to talk about the anatomy of a hyperlink. As we discussed previously, a hyperlink starts with HTTP : and probably looks familiar to you. It's the address at the very top of your browser where you're intending to go, your destination. In this case, the example starts with we're wanting to go to Fandango. Perhaps we'd like to go check out movie times. So let's say that someone has sent us an email and has this link in here and says, hey, check this out and tell me what your thoughts are. Well, we want to first inspect this and try to understand what the intent was. It looks obviously out of the gate that they're wanting us to go to this web address link that we discussed. And there's also something called a redirect address link. The redirect can always be found on a computer by hovering over, or what we call a mouse over. Just simply putting your mouse over the link. If you hold it over the link, you'll see a window pop up similar to what you see here in the number 2 box. And it will tell you this is where we're planning to go when you click on it. That's what your computer is telling you with that pop-up box. So you're looking at a link that was embedded in your email that says, hey, go look at this, and it says fandango.com/movie times. And you'll notice that when we hover over it, the pop-up tells us that it is in fact going to fandango.com/movie times. In this case, it tells us we can also control-click to follow it. If we break this down further, we see that there is a primary domain, and the primary domain is defined by the section that happens before the first slash, the forward slash that you see there. So in this case, the last thing that you see is .com/movie times. More specifically, fandango.com/movie times. So this is your primary domain. The full address match is everything that you see in the entire link, and that's what we're looking for as you see in the mouse over. You see that in fact, everything we see in the link matches exactly what we see in the mouse over. Here's another example that talks about, does the link match? This is one that we know it does not. This is an example of one that we know the link and the redirect do not match. So for example, the link that we got in an email might have said https www.pnfp.com/learning-center/calculators. But before we click it, we mouse over and we find that our pop-up window, as you see, shows us the redirect address link does not match. And if we specifically point this out, you notice that as in the last slide, we told you to go to the / at the after.com, and we see that it's going to learning-center. And in our example, we go to pnfpaccessworks.com, and they do not match. So you need to be very careful. This is an example where just a simple mouse over tells you this is not going to where the link says it's supposed to be going, and that is your first indicator. If the mouse over does not match what the link says, that's your first indicator of compromise. Here's another example. This one is showing some that does actually match, where you see at the top in example 1, pnfp.com is your primary domain / personal-finance. And again, if you look at the top in the mouse over, we see that it shows pnfp.com / personal-finance. The second example is also a match. If you follow it to a T, you'll notice that it is a match. However, one of the things that we want to point out here is that in this case, it's not pnfp.com, it's pnfp.appalerts.net. And so again, it's understanding what the primary domain is, and is this exactly what you were expecting? Have you ever seen pnfp.appalerts.net or even pnfp.net for that matter? And is that somewhere you expect that you would be going? This is a common tactic that's deployed by bad guys, as they start with a piece of the information that you might trust, such as PNFP in the namespace, but yet there's something additional added onto it, or a tag along, if you will. In this case, it's going to pnfp.appalerts.net, and if we pulled it out, what that really means is we're going to a web space called appalerts.net. And that is not what you're intending, and that's not where you're, again, it's sometimes a play on your eyes and your mind. You see PNFP and you initially think that's where I'm going, but you have to look for that primary domain and make sure that it's exactly where you want to go. In this case, you likely do not want to go to someone called appalerts.net to get to your personal finance. Here's some examples in our workshop series on the hyperlink containing a shortened link. This is very, very common, especially and more prevalent in the last year, where you will get a link, and you may get this link in either an email or you might get it in a text, and even dangerous either way, because looking at the web address tinyurl.com or bit.ly, there is no way for me to understand exactly what this is or where it's going. I do know by looking at them that it's a longer link that someone has shortened, but I don't know where it's going. So it's dangerous for me to click on that if I don't know where I'm going. General rule of thumb that I tell people is verify before you click on anything. If one of my friends send me a link and say, hey, check this out, and that's all it says is, hey, check this out, and they send me a link that looks like this, I'm going to pick up the phone and call them and say, did you just send me a link? And I'm going to make sure that I verified they in fact sent me something before I just blindly click on it. That goes for family members, that goes for even my wife. I don't trust that someone's sending me something if I can't verify where it's going, especially on your mobile device. It's harder to see on a mobile device than it is on a computer, and you may not have the tools handily available to you. So there are tools, as we mentioned, that you can use. One of the ones that I like to go to is, as you see on the screen here, we have urlex.org. You may get one of those previously examples where someone has sent you a tiny URL and you're not sure where it goes and you would like to know where it goes before you click on it. You can simply open this web page and copy and paste where the site was or what the link is, and it will tell you. And for example, here you will see someone sent us a link that says amzn.to, and then there's just a string of random numbers. If we put that in and we hit expand, it will pop up and tell us where this is trying to go, and you'll see in the red, this is trying to go to amazon.com/amazon-echo dot, and then it goes on even further to tell you what it was, where the link was. Very, very important. There are several tools out there that are like this. This is just an example of one where it will build out those tiny URLs for you. Another tool that we use in understanding how to open, or if I should click on something, or if I believe that this is a legitimate email, is we have a tool that we use at Pinnacle that we call the Super 6. It's 6 different questions that you can ask yourself to help you understand if I should even consider this to be a legitimate email. And I'll quickly run through them. It's very, very simple, but our rule of thumb is if you go through these 6 and you have more than one, then you should have cause for concern. First question that we ask is, did I get an email unsolicited? Was it a response to an email I sent, or was it something that came to me out of nowhere? The second is the source or the person that sent it to you, are they familiar to you? In this case, we say, is it unfamiliar? But it's the question, do you know them? Did someone send you an email that you know, or is it something that you don't know? And again, just because it might have J. Hopwood, for example, in the address, is it from an address that you've never seen before? So you may have been used to seeing emails jhopwood at Gmail, for example, but you get a jhopwood at Yahoo, and you say, I don't think I've ever gotten an email from this source, right? The next item that we ask you is does the email ask you to do something? Does it ask you to take an action? Does it ask you to click on something or open an attachment or log in somewhere to proceed to the next level of the email? Or is it informational, or is it a response? So again, if in this case, if we're only at 3, if you got an email that you didn't expect and you had no clue who the sender was and it asked you to click on a link, that's 3 for 3. You should probably just hit delete and move on. The other 4, number 4, 5, and 6 here, the other 3 options tell us that after reading it, does the email seem suspicious? Does it contain questionable typos or syntax? Is the sentence structure accurate? Many times if it's someone that does not speak the English language very well, the sentence structure might be off. And so if you see anything of that nature that causes you some concern or pause, again, adding into, did you see one of the other items? If you mouse over the link, as we just showed you in the previous slides, does the redirect address look different or unfamiliar than where you expected it to go if you click on it? And then finally, the most dangerous, is there an attachment or a link that asks you to open something that ends with an exe or a zip or a PDF or a bat file, you're wanting to find out if it's trying to get you to run a script or a batch, or it's trying to run a particular program. Very, very dangerous when you're clicking on a link, and you would never want to do that if, for example, you didn't expect the email, it was unfamiliar, or it had some of these other items in it. So this is just a simple tool that you can print and post near your computer and remind yourself when you're getting an email whether or not it's something you should click on or open. General rule of thumb that I tell people in training is, unless there's reason for you to click on something, you should always be wary of a click. You should always be wary of an attachment. Even if it is from a legitimate source, you should consider and question, like I said I've done in previous slides. If someone sends me something, I might call and say, hey, did you send me an attachment that wants me to click on this program? My personal policy is not to click on programs, so what was it that you just sent me? And further investigate that. We're going to go back through a quick review on hyperlinks. We see these links where we showed you examples where, for example, a link points somewhere else, or we might have a link that we're not sure where it points because it's been created into a tiny URL, or we see something that we're not expecting. For example, they start with pnfp.myonlinebanking, which makes us feel comfortable. We might be familiar, but it ends with a .nz, and we're not sure where that might go. It's not a .com. It's not anything we're expecting. So we have to be very careful on where those might go. Another tip here: webmutation.net and siteadvisor.com are another couple of tools that you can use to go find out if the link that someone has asked you to click on is legitimate. Here's another example of an actual email. In this case, it was sent to Eddie Alford, and it, right at the surface, when I start to look at it, it looks very legitimate. It's got the Pinnacle logo. It looks like it might even be very something official. It says Pinnacle Financial Partners at the bottom. So again, going through our Super 6, I first asked, who is this coming from? And I noticed at the top it's coming from the online banking admin. Well, that seems kind of official, but yet it says that the domain it's coming from is securebankinggroup.org. And that is not something I would be expecting from my bank, for example. If something was sent to me that has a Pinnacle logo on it, I would be expecting an @pnfp.com, for example. So that's the first caution here that I say, I'm not sure, even though it knows my name, and it's saying, here's your online banking information, I'm not sure that I'm going to click on this link yet, because already out of the gate, it says at the top, please log on to online banking, and it says @pnfp.com, yet the email comes from someone that ends with securebankinggroup.org. So that causes me pause, and I'm not going to click on this link. But further, we see that if you hover over the link that is there, you will notice that it's going to onlinebanking.securebankinggroup.com, and it has a whole logon string here. Again, this has nothing to do with pnfp.com. So I'm not going to click on this particular link for that reason, even though it looks very official, and it came to me unsolicited out of nowhere. We're now going to move into a workshop series here discussing social media security and how to stay safe in your digital world. We're often asked, what are the risks of using social media? And a few of the things that we're concerned with here, again, is the phishing aspect of it, malicious ads on some of the social media websites, scripts that might be built in. For example, you're on a social media site such as LinkedIn, or you might be at Facebook, and yet there's something running on the side, an ad or a game that it wants you to download, or even something embedded in the page that you're not even sure is happening in the background. So you have to be careful that you have protection while using these services. Second, you want to be careful with identity theft. The information that you put out there on social media, how much you share, is It makes it very easy for people to get dates, maybe your birth date. If someone's saying happy birthday, now people know your name and your birth date. So you have to be very careful what you're putting out there. Privacy concerns, this talks about the information that others might post or you might post, children's names, your home address, where you might be going on vacation, when you might be going on vacation. These are all things that people do not consider the implication that if someone knows, for example, that you're out of the country, that might be a target for your home or your property, for example. So here we show you some examples of how to dial in or dial up your privacy settings, turning them up and setting them. Again, one of the things that you want to do when you subscribe to any service, you don't want to just sign up and take the default standards. You want to make sure and understand what they're sharing and how they're sharing it. Here we show some example screenshots of Facebook and where you can go into your privacy settings at your security and log on and see where, example here at the top, who can see your posts. Only me, friends or friends of friends, or in this case, one of the examples we show here is who can look you up using the phone number you provide, and that's everyone in the world. So you want to be very careful what you are allowing and who you're allowing that information to be shared with. In this screen we show an example from a LinkedIn request. This is an email that would have been sent to, in this case, Lee Marie, that shows, hey, I'd like to join your LinkedIn network, and you can click the accept button here or the view profile. Again, this is an example of a different type of hyperlink. So even though it doesn't show a link out there that you would like to see, a www, that button is the exact same thing as a hyperlink. And as you can see in our mouse over example, we show that the target, when you click on that button, this is the domain that it's going to. In this case, you'll see that it goes to linkedin.com. So you want to be careful whether or not you're clicking on links. Again, the safest thing is, if you see an email like this, is to go to your application or go to the website direct and log in and accept that person's invitation there rather than clicking on anything in an email. If you are going to use smartphones or smart devices, mobile apps, one of the recommendations that we have is that you run a security application. There are several out there that are free or very inexpensive. Avast or Lookout Mobile are two that I know that are out there that are available at no cost. They will help you to identify and tell you whether or not the apps that you're installing are trusted, or if something's trying to access something that it shouldn't. Twitter is a fantastic tool that allows us to get bytes of information or bits of information out to people quickly. It's also dangerous. Here's an example, and this is again just an example of sharing too much on social media. And this particular post, and sometimes even a consideration of an out-of-office message, or if you're using out-of-office type messages at home that says, I'm going to be out of the country for the next 2 weeks. It may not be the best message you want to send to a stranger who is going to be emailing you, or a spammer, so that everyone in the world knows when they email you that the auto response is, I'm out of the country, or I'm on vacation, or I'm not at my home and it's unprotected as we speak. So good example here of posting what, today my child, for example, whose name is Grace, and you give out information like that. I went to pick Grace up at her school, and you name the school, or you name the time that you normally pick them up. All information that sounds benign, but if you're sharing, as you saw in the settings that we just talked about, if you share that with the entire world, then the entire world on Facebook would know where you're at, where you're going, where your children are at, where they go to school, things that you might not consider when you're posting it that could be used in a harmful way. So making sure that you have your settings dialed in and that you're only sharing with your friends makes it less risky if you're posting information about where you are at or who you're there with. Other items here about is knowing, for example, if you are on vacation and you're taking pictures, there is what's called geotagging, and many phones right from default have geotagging turned on, and that means that if you post a picture, someone could look at the properties of that picture and tell exactly where you were when you took that picture. So you want to, again, be careful with what your settings are. And there's an example here at the bottom showing you how you can turn the GPS or geotagging off on your pictures. And again, if you, depending on the type of phone you have, you can always Google how to turn off geotagging or how to turn off GPS tagging and find a link or a tutorial on how to do that. We're going to talk about safe passwords and what good strategies are for building a strong password. One of the first things that we tell everyone is not to use whole or normal words. For many years now, there have been password cracking or hacking tools that use dictionaries, standard words that are found in the dictionary. So therefore, one of the first things that we teach people is not to use a word that can be found in a dictionary. And one of the typical responses is, how do I use an English word that is not found in the dictionary? And the response is to insert a number, for example, or make up acronyms that you would never find in the dictionary. For example, the word Dell, if you replaced the E in the word Dell with the number 3 and it was D3LL, you're not going to find the word D3LL in any dictionary. And so we've taken a word that you might be able to find in the dictionary and we've made a word that you could not find. So special characters such as a pound or hashtag or the ampersand or an exclamation or as you see in our example here, the $ is another way to make a password harder to understand. We have an example here where someone took a sentence, my son loves to play soccer and football, and they took the first letter of those and added some unique characters such as the $ for S and the number 2 for the word 2, and they've come up with the password examples that you have here. And this is just an example where each company or each application might have requirements and say it has to be 7 characters, or it can or cannot use special characters, or it has to have a number. This is an example of how you can build a strategy in order to achieve those goals. The result is you have a password here that is complex, highly complex, and difficult to guess or crack, but yet it meets all of what we call a complex password. Talk about keeping your password safe. There are applications to help you keep your password safe, both for your computer and for your mobile devices. We've listed a couple here. KeyPass.info is a free software application that allows you to store passwords in a vault. LastPass offers similar as well. One of the most common things for folks to do is write passwords down in a what they call a safe location. For example, my grandmother writes everything down in a notepad. She will tell you that she stores that notepad in a safe place or in a safe drawer, but it's dangerous to have all of your passwords written somewhere where if they had a physical burglary, they would also now have access to your online banking and several other things. So having a place where you can encrypt, the key word on this page, if you take nothing else away, is whatever system you use, make sure that it says it's an encrypted solution. That means someone who might stumble across the file, if they don't know the master password to it, everything that they're going to see is going to be encrypted, which is going to look like characters that you're unable to decipher and know what is in there. Talk a bit about public Wi-Fi, being careful where you surf and knowing what is good and what is not. And the example that I give on this is many years ago I went to a security conference, and at that security conference across the street was a Starbucks coffee shop. And one of the people that was presenting gave us a demonstration on how easy it is for cyber criminals to take advantage of a Starbucks free Wi-Fi. Because it's free, that means that immediately everybody is able to join. And if you're able to join and they can sit in the coffee shop long enough, they can run tools that can actually compromise that hotspot. And in this particular scenario, they made it such that all you had to do was just join the Wi-Fi, and it dropped a piece of software on your computer that caused you harm. So you have to be careful that, again, as I have mentioned to other people in passing, that and my grandmother used to tell me, nothing is free, right? There's everything comes at a cost, and you have to understand that just because something is free does not mean that you should just join it. My daughter, for example, every time we walk in the door, it says free Wi-Fi. She wants to go ahead and join that Wi-Fi because it's free, and that will save my data plan. However, you have to ask yourself, is it worth saving that usage versus the compromise that you could potentially get? The other kind of litmus here is it a larger known chain that might have the ability and the resources and the money to invest in a good firewall to prevent people from compromising it? Or is it a small, what I would call a mom and pop shop that may or may not have the ability to stand up protected Wi-Fi? So you want to be very careful with how you're browsing Wi-Fi. Remember that you can always use your own smartphone. If you don't know how to, most every smartphone and most every data package now comes with the ability to create what's called your own hotspot. So again, you can look up tutorials on how to turn my phone into a secure hotspot. The other options that you can do is use virtual private networking software or VPN software, so that your traffic is encrypted, and so that the usage, that even if the hotspot was compromised somehow, all of your data would be encrypted. Here's an article that you can go and look and see more about the top VPN softwares out there, and many of them are free. Another area that we're going to cover and make sure that everyone is aware is a way to protect yourself is also to ensure you have backups on your computer. There's several real threats out there: crypto locker, ransomware, other types of software that can encrypt or lock your files or make them unavailable, and they tell you that the only way you can get those files back is if you will pay a ransom or pay a fee to get them back. One of the number one ways that we fight this is simply to restore to a previous state from a backup. And so making sure that you have regular backups is very, very important to have the ability to recover from an attack or recover from having a compromise. You want to make sure that you always update your operating system. These are the patches. If you have either the Microsoft or the Macintosh platform, both provide updated security or operating system updates on a regular basis. You want to make sure that you have those updates. What those updates are is known compromises that have been identified, and then the manufacturer's response to that on how to close that. So a way to stay secure is to make sure you're always updating your computer. I know that I've had questions in previous sessions: is it really important for me to update my computer? I'm afraid that if I update my computer, it might break it. And I would say the chance is much larger that if you don't update your computer, you will have a compromise than the chance of you updating your computer and having an issue with it. So it's better to take the risk. And again, before you do an update, again, the recommendation is make sure you have a backup. In case you do have an issue with the update, you can always go back to the backup. You want to make sure that if you keep any information in a USB storage, so such as a USB drive or a USB disk, you want to make sure that that is stored in a different location and not always plugged into your computer. If you have a desktop computer, for example, and you have a USB drive plugged into it for nightly backups, you need to understand that some of these attacks, such as crypto locker and ransomware, can also extend to your USB drive and encrypt your backups, for example. So if you are going to have a backup, make sure that that backup is stored in a separate location that is not connected to your computer. So that way you have the ability to go back to that connection. Some people do this by rotating drives. They might have a week 1 and a week 2 USB drive, and so worst case scenario, you've lost a few days worth of data if you have to go back to week 1's backups. Again, cost of small USB drives to back up your important data is very, very affordable, and much more than it would cost you to try to recover from another type of ransomware. There are other services out there, cloud backup services, iCloud, Google Drive, Carbonite, all very, very good options. Again, you can Google to find answers of that type of nature, or you can look at the PC Mag article that we put here for you. We're going to talk about some tips on if you believe you have been hacked or compromised in any way, or if you believe your identity has been stolen. There's a number of items here on the screen. The most important thing is understanding who to go to or where to go, depending on what type of issue you believe you have. If you believe that your identity has been stolen, or you believe that someone out there is using your identity, there are a couple different places you can go. You can go to identitytheft.gov. You can also contact identity services. LifeLock, for example, is a common one that can help folks that, two things: it can help you prevent having your identity stolen, but it can also help you recover from a stolen identity. If you think for any reason, this is why we put it at the top, if you think for any reason that your identity has been compromised in any way, shape, or form, you should contact your financial advisor immediately. Contact not just your bank, but investment firms, any place where you have monies. You should make sure that you contact them and tell them they can put things like a freeze, or they can put a hold on your account, and or issue new cards, or any number of different, depending on how severe the risk is there, they can tell you what they recommend. You can also, another good thing that we tell people to do is, it's important for you to pull your credit report. Many states now force to give you a free credit report. You can also go to annualcreditreport.com, where you can call the different bureaus. Everyone is entitled to get a free annual credit report. So there are mechanisms, again, to get that out there. It's important for you to review that, just to make sure that, just like you would your monthly bank statement or your monthly credit card statement, do I see things on there or charges that I don't recognize? Even if you don't have any monies associated with it, you just see an address that has your name associated with it. That can be the start of an identity theft. So anything like that would cause you to have concern and start to take action on it. If you believe your email or your computer or your PC has been compromised or has been hacked in any way, we recommend that you take it to a professional. There are, the Geek Squad, for example, is pretty famous at Best Buy. Staples and Office Depot have computer services. If you're in the Nashville market, there's a company out there called Computer Renaissance. There's lots of local professional shops. Typically, these organizations will conduct a maintenance or at least a scan for you at a very, very reasonable price. And again, with the amount of data and the type of data that's stored on your computer, it's worth the investment if you believe that there's a compromise to have it checked out. If you believe that there's loans or bills, or you're getting mail that says that makes you have concern, that you think maybe someone is using your identity to take out a loan, you can contact the Federal Trade Commission at the link we have provided here. Or if you think there's other electronic fraud, you can report it to ic3.gov. That's the Internet Crime Complaint Center. There's a form there for you to fill out. If there's monies that have been stolen or lost that are over $10,000 or more in nature, you can contact the Secret Service. It's a little known fact. Many people think the Secret Service just protect the president, but many years ago, the Secret Service was tasked with any crime that has to do with an individual's monetary nature. So if you have money stolen from you that are great in nature, as I mentioned, I think it's $10,000 or more, you can contact the Secret Service on their website as well. So let's review on a few things on how to make yourself a hard target, not an easy one to hit. We want to ask you to dig deep, understand what hyperlinks look like, understand the risk of shortened URLs, understand the social media settings and how to maximize your privacy and customize those settings, being careful with mobile phones and geolocation services that might come default or be turned on already, using different security applications to guard your credentials, creating and using strong passwords and not reusing them. Again, ensuring that you're not using the same banking password that you use on your Gmail account, and making sure that you're not using the same password for your computer that you're using for your online banking. It's just, you don't have to have 10 different passwords, but a good rule of thumb is to keep anything financially related as a separate password than anything email related, for example. So public Wi-Fi, being careful when and where you surf, remembering that free doesn't always mean free. If you don't have a reason to, it's not a good practice just to join a free Wi-Fi. And understanding what to do if and when you feel like you've had your computer compromised or your identity stolen. We'd like to thank you for visiting this workshop series today, and offer that if you need additional resources for cybersecurity, please visit our Learning Center that can be found out on our website at pnfp.com.